I have a message for the tyrants of Tehran. If you strike us, we will strike you. There is no place in Iran that the long arm of Israel cannot reach. And that's true of the entire Middle East. Far from being lambs led to the slaughter, Israel's soldiers have fought back with incredible courage and with heroic sacrifice. And I have another message for this assembly and for the world outside this hall. We are winning. For too long, the world has appeased Iran. It turns a blind eye to its internal repression. It turns a blind eye to its external aggression. Well, that appeasement must end. And that appeasement must end now. Nations of the world should support the brave people of Iran who want to rid themselves of this evil regime. Responsible governments should not only support Israel in rolling back Iran's aggression, they should join Israel. They should join Israel in stopping Iran's nuclear weapons program. So I want you to think about this in equivalent American terms. Just imagine if terrorists turned El Paso and San Diego into ghost towns. Then ask yourself, how long would the American government tolerate that? A day? A week? A month? I doubt they tolerate it even for a single day. Yet Israel has been tolerating this intolerable situation for nearly a year. Well, I've come here today to say enough is enough.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised that archfoe Iran would pay for its missile attack against Israel on Tuesday, while Tehran said any retaliation would be met with vast destruction, raising fears of a wider war. As Washington expressed full backing for its longtime ally Israel, Iran's armed forces said direct intervention by Israel's supporters against Tehran would provoke a strong attack from Iran on their bases and interests in the region. Oil prices shot up 5% on fears of a wider war between the two arch-enemies, and the UN Security Council scheduled a meeting on the Middle East for Wednesday. Iran made a big mistake tonight and it will pay for it, Netanyahu said at the outset of a political security meeting, according to a statement. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps said the assault was in retaliation for Israeli killings of militant leaders and aggression in Lebanon against the Iran-backed armed movement Hezbollah and in Gaza. Fears that Iran and the U.S. would be drawn into a regional war have risen with Israel's intensifying assault on Lebanon in the past 2 weeks, including the start of a ground operation there on Monday, and its year-old conflict in the Gaza Strip. In its attack on Tuesday, Iran fired more than 180 ballistic missiles at Israel, Israel said. Alarms sounded across Israel and explosions could be heard in Jerusalem and the Jordan River Valley. Israelis piled into bomb shelters and reporters on state television lay flat on the ground during live broadcasts. Iran's forces used hypersonic Fata missiles for the first time, and 90% of its missiles successfully hit their targets in Israel, the Revolutionary Guard said. Israeli air defenses were activated and most missiles were intercepted by Israel and a defensive coalition led by the United States, Israeli Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari said in a video on X, adding, Iran's attack is a severe and dangerous escalation. Central Israel received a small number of hits and there were other strikes in southern Israel, he said. The Israeli military published video of a school in the central city of Gadara that was heavily damaged by an Iranian missile. No injuries were reported in Israel, but one man was killed in the occupied West Bank, authorities there said. U.S. Navy warships fired about a dozen interceptors against Iranian missiles headed toward Israel, the Pentagon said. U.S. President Joe Biden expressed full U.S. support for Israel and described Iran's attack as ineffective. He said there was an active discussion about how Israel would respond, and he would confer with Netanyahu. Vice President Kamala Harris, the Democratic candidate for U.S. president, backed Biden's stance and said the U.S. would not hesitate to defend its interests against Iran. Israel vowed consequences for the onslaught. Iran will soon feel the consequences of their actions. The response will be painful, Israel's UN ambassador Danny Danon told reporters. The White House similarly promised severe consequences for Iran, and spokesman Jake Sullivan told a Washington briefing the U.S. would work with Israel to make that the case. Sullivan did not specify what those consequences might be, but he stopped short of urging restraint by Israel as the U.S. did in April when Iran carried out a drone and missile attack on Israel. The Pentagon said Tuesday's airstrikes were about twice the size of April's assault. Any Israeli response to Tuesday's missile attack would be met with vast destruction of Israeli infrastructure, Iran's General Staff of the Armed Forces said in a statement carried by state media, also promising to target regional assets of any Israeli ally that got involved. Iran's foreign ministry said its operation was defensive and only directed at Israeli military and security facilities. Earlier, Iran's state news agency said Tehran targeted 3 Israeli military bases. Iran urged UN Security Council action. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres condemned what he called escalation after escalation, saying, "This must stop. We absolutely need a ceasefire." EU Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell also called for an immediate regional ceasefire. The dangerous cycle of attacks and retaliation risks spiraling out of control, he posted on X. Iran had vowed to retaliate following Israeli strikes that killed the top leadership of its ally Hezbollah in Lebanon, including the group's leader Hassan Nasrallah, a towering figure in Iran's network of fighters across the region. Hamas, the Iran-backed militant group in Gaza, praised the Iranian missile strikes, saying they avenged Israeli assassinations of 3 militant leaders, including Nasrallah. Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, locked in nearly a year of war, celebrated as they watched dozens of rockets en route to Israel. Some of those rockets fell in the Palestinian enclave after being intercepted by Israel but caused no deaths, witnesses said. In Beirut, Israeli strikes killed the commander of the Imam Hussein division, Israel's military said, referring to a Hezbollah-linked group based in Syria. Lebanon's health ministry said 55 were killed and 156 wounded in Israeli attacks on Tuesday. Israel said overnight that its troops had launched ground raids into Lebanon, though it described the forays as limited. Nearly 1,900 people have been killed and more than 9,000 wounded in Lebanon in almost a year of cross-border fighting, most in the past 2 weeks, according to Lebanese government statistics on Tuesday. But a ground campaign into Lebanon for the first time in 18 years pitting Israeli soldiers against Hezbollah, Iran's best-armed proxy force in the Middle East, would be a major regional escalation. The 4.5 magnitude earthquake in Iran's Aradan city yesterday is believed to be a nuclear test conducted by Iran. They moved many of Iran's strategic systems underground, including nuclear technology. So Israel's counterattacks are aimed at Iranian dummies, which are virtually useless other than newsworthy. As early as October 7, Hamas had established its underground base before attacking Israel from the air, land, and sea. Iran has done the same thing that Hamas has done here. Iran's attack on Israel comes after it has developed a vast underground network of weapons and
tunnels off tunnels, rooms off tunnels, glass doors. The huge engineering project that Hamas ran for years under the nose where the tunnel opens and nobody masterminded the October 7 attack.
Just as Hamas did in Gaza, Iran should assume that their weapons, technology, and radar systems are all underground. If that is the case, the technology to explore 250 to 500 meters below Iran's soil will have to be used. That would delay counterattacks. China and Russia's past anti-Semitism has greatly helped Iran. At the same time, Israel has marked Iran's secret strategic areas. Despite being a nuclear leader, Russia today is weak militarily and economically, and thus does not benefit Iran, which is dependent on Russia. Although Israel is a small country, it is more of a technology than a military power. Israel has developed new warfare technologies that countries have never used before. That is why Israel is advancing despite the lack of support from Western countries like France and India. What Israel needs is India's diplomatic ties, and the West is providing all of India's fireworks in terms of military equipment. In the era of technological advancement, now all wars are fought with great patience. This is not the Rama-Ravana mythological war. All the living and dead terrorists in the world today are raised in the milk of Iran, the mother of all terrorism. In a sense, if Israel is fighting the terrorist forces that attacked Israel by air, sea, and land simultaneously on October 7, killing hundreds of Israelis and abducting hundreds of people, Iran is preventing it and providing weapons and assistance to terrorist groups such as Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthi to attack Israel. In the end, Khomeini, the supreme leader of Iran, has come to the fore and taken the helm of the war. Therefore, Khomeini, Yahya, Iran's nuclear power plants, surface and underground strategic centers are all targets of Israel. This attack by Iran is a response from Israel, which is advancing against Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, and as the war spreads from Palestine, Syria, Lebanon, Beirut, and other countries, we are the next victim.